Let's start with Homes Today, which is a proud presentation of Audrey June Forshey. Audrey is a RE/MAX realtor as well as an excellent advisor. Here on this set, Audrey provides all the pertinent information involved in buying or selling a home. Let's see her feature for this week.
Hello. Hi friends, thank you for joining us today. My name is Audrey Forshey and I'm a RE/MAX agent in Montgomery County, Maryland. And today we have a structural engineer with us. And I'm going to tell you, as a 30-year agent, I am very happy to talk to you, Mr. Brian Tarantino. He is of Tarantino Engineer Consultant out of Maryland. And I am very happy to have him here because in a real estate transaction, if a structural engineer gets called into my transaction, he's either going to make me very happy or he's going to make me very sad. So thank you for being with us today, Brian. I'm really happy to have you. So just for the basics, we'll just start out. What is a structural engineer?
So engineers, by basis definition, are designers and problem solvers. Specifically, structural engineers focus in vector mechanics of portion of physics and strength of material science. Okay, so you're going to tell us how strong or sturdy a building is going to be.
Absolutely. Is that right?
That's
okay.
Right.
All right. And so if I am looking for a structural engineer and I need one for one of my real estate transactions, what am I looking for in terms of like education or qualifications?
So the most important thing you'll want to look for is professional engineering designation.
Okay.
A PE. You probably maybe have heard of that.
So that's kind of like a CPA or something like
Yes.
that. That is your professional designation, PE, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that really comes from an accredited engineering school, typically a Bachelor of Science or Civil Engineering.
Okay.
And followed by a Fundamentals of Engineering exam, which is a broad-based exam.
Okay.
Followed by another 4 years of training under a professional engineer. And then an 8-hour professional engineering exam, which you have to pass to become a professional engineer.
Okay. But that's who I want if I'm looking for somebody to determine the strength or weakness of a building, correct? Or
Absolutely.
a home for me. So typically how it works for me in my scenario for a structural engineer is I'll have a listing or I'll sell a home to a buyer and we'll have our home inspection contingency. And the home inspection contingency can be anywhere from 7 to 10 days. And the inspector will go through the house and they may see cracks or what they call a wall, I've heard them say a bulging wall in the basement or something like that. And most good home inspectors will tell you that you need to call in a structural engineer to verify the strength or how good the house is or if there's a structural problem. There are some home inspectors that think they're structural engineers, and I have a really hard time with some of them, but I say let's just get the structural engineer in here and then we'll see what the issue is. So at that point, I'm going to extend my contingency time on the condition of the property, and we're going to call in a structural engineer, and then you're going to come into the house. And what do you do? What are you looking at in the house that is a sign? I mean, I know there's different things, but basically, what are you doing when you come to the house?
Sure. Well, just like you mentioned, a lot of the calls we get in the real estate transaction are from home inspection reports.
Okay.
So home inspectors, we like to explain home inspectors as a huge pool, just a huge pool, but somewhat shallow. Mm-hmm. So they're that amount of knowledge, just a vast amount of knowledge, but not very deep and not very specialized.
Right.
So when they get into a situation where they see something that's really beyond their expertise, beyond what a code minimum type of scenario is, that's when they'll recommend calling a structural engineer. So what we'll do is there are many times where we're actually called into a transaction, but this particular one, what we'll do is we'll actually look at the home inspector's report for those specific items. So we'll tell the homeowner and the agent, we are coming out to look at items, 3A, 5B, and 6C, specifically those items. And we call them suspected damage.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we'll actually go in using the tools at our disposal. We call it our forensic engineering practice.
Okay.
To determine if they are indeed a structural deficiency or not.
Okay. And so the kinds of things that I think my home inspectors will see in a home are, if you have a cinder block wall in the basement, and if there's the crack and the grout. I've heard it said that if the cracks are going north and south, they're usually not so suspect, but if they're east and west, they're usually a little bit more suspect. Is that true, or you can't use that as a rule of thumb?
That's a pretty good rule of thumb, actually.
It is?
It really is. So lots of times the north-south cracks that you're talking about, those are what we call shrinkage or temperature cracks, which mostly form during the construction phase or soon after that. What you do want to worry about in a north-south crack, though, is if there's differential displacement in the wall.
Okay.
So if one portion of the wall looks like this and the other portion is like that,
okay,
big cause of concern, even if it's a north-south crack.
Okay, okay.
So an east-west crack usually means that the basement wall is failing,
Okay.
and that's usually accompanied by a bulging. So if you put a level on the wall, the wall will be out of plumb.
Okay.
So yeah, that generally is accurate.
And if that's the case in the basement, can you see problems in other areas of the house? Let's say that there's brick on the outside of the house. Would the exterior brick move or anything, or could that just be that could be intact, but the basement walls having a problem? It just different stages, maybe?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because really what we look at lots of times, the structure's covered, right? There's drywall up, there's brick on the outside, and lots of people don't understand necessarily that brick, especially in newer homes, is a veneer. It's not actually
Real
structural.
brick.
It's not a structural element.
Okay.
So we look for cracks in the brick or cracks in the drywall to actually let us know that there might be a problem underneath.
Okay.
So it could be if we see a crack in the brick, it might actually be related to basement movement or settling.
Okay.
Most of the times you're seeing crack in the brick or water infiltration, settlement, things of those nature that would point to a structural problem.
Do you think that most home inspectors, if they see the cracks, they're good to alert the agent? And do you think that they're right on most of the time if there's a structural issue?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Most of the time. There are a few cases where we go out and, it's a very simple, just use some caulk and make sure you keep the water out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're usually pretty good. We deal with a lot of reputable home inspectors. And we actually have a good rapport with them. If something is of particular note, we actually will, if it's okay with the real estate agent and the homeowner, we'll actually provide our letter back to the home inspector so they really see what the result and how serious the thing that we pointed out.
That's good. Okay, that's good. That just helps them keep their clarity and know that they're on track and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
What about, is there a difference in what you look for in terms of residential real estate versus commercial real estate? Is there a difference? Are there different codes? That kind of a thing. So what happens there?
Sure, there are different codes. There's something called the IRC, the International Residential Code, and then IBC, which is the International Building Code.
Okay.
So we do have different codes, but generally the heart of the inspection is really the same. We're looking to make sure the structures hasn't deteriorated, is performing as it was designed and intended. So really the heart of the two transactions are really the same. Now commercial is a little bit different because they're usually coming at it with a team of, you're not using a general home inspector.
Right.
You're actually bringing in specialists right from the get-go.
Okay.
Architect, structural engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, right from the get-go.
Okay.
And those typical types of reports are usually much more robust.
Yeah.
The investment's a lot more.
Yeah, typically on commercial real estate. So, and when, I know every house and every transaction is different, but typically, do you find that some of the fixes that homeowners have to do on average, I know there's probably houses that, would make you nervous to live in or probably shouldn't live in, but are the fixes, can they be relatively simple, or do you find that they really get into some high dollar renovations or fixes? What happens when you go in and find big problems?
That's, really the types of things we find are so drastic. I mean, we from a house that we looked at on the bay where it had pile damage. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of work.
Wow.
You know, down to a split joist, which might be only about $75 worth of work.
Yeah.
So it really does vary. Lots of times on smaller type projects, even really, we might even recommend to if I see something very, very simple in a report, I might actually just make a quick phone call and say, look, you don't need me out. It's pretty easy thing to fix, and just fix it rather than pay the money to have a structural engineer come out, write a report, et cetera.
So if I have you come out and look at my listing, let's say, because the home inspector said that there was a structural problem, what kind of just fees, what would be the expectation of fees for structural engineers in general to come out to a home typically? What would that be?
Sure. We're a time-based business, so it really, every hour, whether it's on the road or in the field or writing a report, we charge for it.
Okay.
Very similar to like an attorney might do.
Okay.
So that could range, depending on the location from our office. It can, I think on the low side you're looking at $300.
Okay.
On something really serious, we can get up into about $1,000.
Okay. All right. So that's probably pretty typical for an inspection. I think that's normal. I always wondered, like a structural engineer, how much does he cost sometimes? Right. Back to the home that you said down on the bay that had hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. I have never had that experience, and so I wouldn't even know how that would be handled. Do they tear the house down and rebuild another house? Do you just determine it by the value of the house, what the overall value is, I guess?
Yeah, it's. I mean, those types of projects are. Yeah, you're talking about temporary support, maybe even lifting the house up, and while you're getting additional supports under the ground. I mean, that was really a once in a while type problem, and I mean, but the problems can be really drastic to point. Like we've done a lot of work around Ellicott City where there's slope stability problems, where houses are literally like falling down the hill.
Is that in the Old Town area?
Yeah. Just upstream.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it can get pretty hairy, and we use lots of times in our reports and our letters we'll give estimates of what we think that might cost, and that's really helpful in the transaction, so people really understand. Okay, if I'm moving into this house, how much money am I really going to be spending over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and does it really become part of the transaction? Does it affect the price?
Right, and sometimes that might just make some people afraid and cancel the house.
Happens.
So I'm so happy to have had Brian Tarantino here. I'm telling you, structural engineers in real estate sometimes in our inspections can make us nervous, or they can make us really happy. So I'm really happy that you came. Thanks you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.